Yep, sure.
All right, and we can go back to the previous slide just to discuss what we are going to. When Dr. Yusuf and Dr. Musab kind of told me about this talk, initially I wanted to actually talk about my research, but then I figured truly it is not about me. It's more about the students, the postgraduate students, and also about truly the fact that most students are at the stage where they are trying to identify their research areas as well as understand the different aspect of things in order to be able to narrow down specifically what their interests will be, what their interests are, as well as what they would like to research as well as prioritize. So eventually, I might someday talk in depth about my own research, but the goal of this meeting, this session is actually to really break down the research areas within cybersecurity at a very high level, considering the time we have, and then really try to tailor those research areas specific to places like emerging nations, right? Like so places like Nigeria, back home, and all of those kind of things. And if at any point in time, I think the moderators mentioned something like we'll take questions in the end, but whatever happens, please feel free to interrupt me. I'm okay with that. Um, so yeah, the topic for today will be, I was just trying to demystify the cybersecurity research areas. Dr. Musab, I believe you can go to the next slide. High level, in the interest of time, we might just kind of skip a couple of things, but just today we will talk about at a very high level how we got into cybersecurity, as well as the current cybersecurity landscape and different advancements within the field, as well as the part where most students are really much more interested in, which is the different research areas. I think Dr. Musa, Dr. Yusuf, and a lot of the doctors here and professors, I believe we are all used to questions from students on like, I'm trying to do my research. What should I start looking into? So hopefully that number 5 should allow students be able to at least understand the landscape and help them make a decision. So Dr. Musa, we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I think we can skip here. This is just a little bit of what I do, which Dr. Yusuf was graciously kind of covered, as well as my educational background. And we can skip about that. It's not about me. So, without going in depth, I don't expect people to kind of come out of this discussion today due to the interest of time. Like we only have 30 minutes. So I'm not expecting people to have an in-depth understanding of the landscape, but rather looking to really break down what things are so people can understand. One of the most common questions I often get is around, I want to get into cybersecurity. How do I start? Or I want to do something in cloud security, network security, application security. Where do I start from? But there is a fundamental thing that a lot of people tend to miss, which is the security landscape in itself is not a new thing, right? It's not new. Information security truly has been in existence for such a long time. We know about the Egyptian hieroglyphics. Cryptography has been around for a long time. There are discussions about Julius Caesar ciphers and things like that. So those are all part of information security, but computer and cybersecurity in itself, and I know it started as computer security, but it has transformed to become cyber because now technology has transcended just computer devices. That's a subset of information security. So when you start thinking of physical security, you start thinking of security guards, the fact that you're putting a lock in your door in itself is all part of truly information security. A subsector of that, it's where then you start getting into cybersecurity, technology security, digital, and all of those. It's just a subset of information security. So it's very important to, especially for us as academicians, I know in the industry, the words tends to get kind of mixed. But it's very important for us as we embark on research to really delineate between information security and the cybersecurity landscape. Now, within cybersecurity, and I'm ignoring the word computer because computer is now synonymous to systems, not necessarily technology in itself. But as we narrow down, then you start looking at the different focus areas: network security, you mentioned cloud security, application security, system engineering security, and all of those are all subsets within cybersecurity. So most times when people say, I want to do research in cybersecurity, it's like you're trying to boil the ocean. Like, which side of cybersecurity, right? What specifically do you want to look at? Because the entire cybersecurity is a big field, right? So there is a huge importance in putting a focus on really trying to narrow down what exactly you want to research on. Um, if you want to kind of bring yourself up to date in terms of at least a little bit of background in the cybersecurity landscape as well as the computer security, which is part of modern security as we have seen it. So it started really gaining traction in like the 1970s and the 1980s, right? That's when really computer security started becoming a thing because of networks. It's coincidental or rather funny how I was mentioning that network security is a subject of cybersecurity, but when you look at this landscape, actually, network security was the main networking was the main driving factor of the need for actually the whole field of cybersecurity when DARPA kind of created the ARPANET and things like that, something that is absolutely Dr. Musab's primary focus and field when you start getting into that networking side. So yeah, this is just a high level, not meant to be more in-depth educational in terms of what is cybersecurity, but rather to help contextualize as you begin to move forward in narrowing down where to do your research. So Dr. Musab, I believe we can go to the next slide. So let's put a focus on the cybersecurity landscape. When you talk about cybersecurity, as I was mentioning earlier, first, there's really technology, because cybersecurity is just after technology, right? You can, or rather you wouldn't really put a lock on a door without installing the door in itself, right? Or rather, you wouldn't put a lock on a door without really having a building, right? So that cyber side of things is the foundation that needs to that often drives the need for cybersecurity. And as we all know, there are different aspects to technology, cyber in itself. We have the communication and the networks, people like Dr. Musab, the software and application development, infrastructure, and whatsoever. Why are we talking about this landscape? Another thing that is very common with people that are trying to embark on their research is really being all over the place, right? When you go into, as an undergrad, during your bachelor's, you find that you have this generalist perspective of learning, right? So you can say, oh, I'm doing a bachelor's in information technology. That's understandable. Or doing a bachelor's in computer sciences. That's also understandable. But then you start going into that master's and begin to specialize. As you go into your PhD level, trying to do a research, you don't only specialize, but you also put a very narrow myopic focus on a specific thing and embark on that. What I often find is a lot of the people that tend to kind of reach out to me and some of my students, it's around one wants to do a research in cryptography, but at the same time, they have a background probably in cyber forensics. So they want to really do research into landscape. Now it's possible, it's doable. Keep in mind, learning is like having a PhD or even a postdoc or whatever is truly not the end of learning. It's actually the beginning, because the true learning happens after your PhD. For those of you who are PhD students, same thing with like master student. So it's absolutely okay to research in multiple concentrations, but it is very important to really narrow down your research focus into the specific area and prioritize which sector are you really looking into researching. So as we look at the different sectors. There are a lot. They keep coming up, right? I want to really talk a little bit about the principles of information security, and it keeps evolving. There is this whole concept of what we call the CIA triads, which is around the confidentiality, information, integrity, and availability. And now we also have non-repudiation, which people tend to add non-repudiation as part of integrity. The CIA triads are truly some of the major driving factors, or rather some of the things that lay the foundation of what exactly are you securing. So let's use maybe data. If the goal is to secure our data, are you truly trying to make the data secured in a confidential manner, or really ensure the integrity of the data, or even the availability of the data? Those three tend to be the major focus when it comes to security, and they tend to help drive what exactly is done. And when I mentioned that, as an example, right? The way you will secure a system that is meant for national security, probably holding, let me be drastic. If you have a system that is really holding information related to terrorism activities that you do not want people to see, the way a manner that you will configure such system completely differs with how you approach systems that are meant for library, right? A library system, you tend to prioritize availability of data. So you look at it from you basically configure it and secure it in a fashion that is around, if something were to happen, make sure that information is available for consumption. Whereas a system that is maybe national security focused, you might decide to really configure it in such a way that whatever happens, it should actually fail and go into lockdown. So those kind of triads and those governing principles of cybersecurity tend to drive how you approach configuration, installations, implementations, and deployments. But it also differs based on the different landscapes, right? When you look at things from communications perspective, whether synchronous communication or asynchronous communications or over the networks, what you're really looking at also in terms of what kind of security deployments are you implementing completely differs with, say, data centers, right? If you have a specific data residing within maybe your system, probably you might deploy something like a symmetric algorithm that is meant to secure data at rest. Whereas when you're looking at it from a networking and communication perspective, you're probably looking at asymmetric algorithms or some kind of algorithms that is meant to complement both symmetric and asymmetric, like Diffie-Hellman and things like that. So the goal of this slide is truly to, and I did add etc., but the goal of this slide is truly to help you start narrowing down things beyond cybersecurity as a generalist field, as you come up with your research ideas and truly try to formulate your research topics. It's very important to start narrowing down into what exactly are you going to focus on. Dr. Musab, we can go to the next slide. So in terms of current advancements, right, and what kind of deployments exist, I believe a lot of us are able to just quickly look up on, like, basically just Google it and say, what are the new advancements within networking? But that's just one aspect of it. How do you now begin to actually relate and identify the current gaps that exist, right? And how does it even relate to your own needs? And when I say your own needs, we will talk about it later, because this sounds like a lecture, right? But it's important for researchers to also understand the scope of their research. Are you looking at it from a perspective of Nigeria, emerging nations, on a global scale, right? And we will talk about that in depth. But as you begin to narrow down, earlier I mentioned all of these, like communications and network software and development, but that in itself is not enough when you come to research. And I believe those of us that have kind of gone through it can testify to this. you do have to pick a specific advancement, trend, technology, and also narrow down in that, because the goal is not to make a big bang, it's to make a dent. If you are able to make the big bang, that's amazing. But if you're able to transform the field, it's great. But again, you're not trying to boil the ocean, right? You are not really trying to change the entire field, which if you're able to do that, it's amazing. But keep in mind that research actually happens after you've graduated. If you're a PhD student, true research happens after you have graduated, because that's when you start doing a lot of applied research and things like that. So going back here, as we can see, there are so many advancements currently, and whichever topic you pick, it's continuously moving forward. You pick networking, there's 5G, 6G, around certificates, we have TLS 1.4, I think research is ongoing around 1.3 is going on. I believe there's research around 1.4, the different protocols, be it TCP, IP, even within the protocols, now are you prioritizing, optimizing the application layer, transport, networking, all of those different layers. Even within them, which protocol specifically are you looking into, right? Optimizing TCP IP, or sorry, just TCP or UDP or whatever. Actually, you might not even look at the entire TCP IP protocol. You might be looking at something that is completely proprietary, like say link system protocol. Link system is often used by the US military. So all of those, IoT devices, quantum computing and quantum communications. When you pick something like communications and networks and you start researching on that aspect, you will find that there is a need to now go deep dive in that part, not necessarily then try to pick something around, say, malware research, which is not related to, say, the communications and networking. And for most of us back home, what we tend to have is we get distracted by the noise. There is so much noise going around the technology, the hype. You might be doing your research in networking only for you to read elsewhere that, oh, the newest trend is this new cyber warfare or whatever. And then you find people really move into that or trying to add that to their research. I found that to be very ineffective in many cases, because what it does is it truly distracts you from making an impact in your primary focus. I can tell you this, a lot of people might be able to have an understanding on the entire landscape, but they don't necessarily specialize in all, right? So when it comes to research, it's quite important for us to specialize, not necessarily be the generalist. It's okay to be a generalist if you're an academician after you've graduated and started teaching students, then you can know a little bit of everything, right? But in terms of your research, there has to be a need to specialize in something. So looking at things from the software and application development currently, there has been so much push towards the life cycle of optimization and the approach. So we had the waterfall, agile methodologies, and things like that. Now the newest trend is truly the DevSecOps, meaning incorporating security in development efforts. We have the secure development lifecycle, containerizations like Kubernetes and things are really taking off. Infrastructure around data centers have been in existence for decades, but truly cloud computing is making so much wave. And as you start looking at things from cloud computing perspective, we have so much advancement around zero trust, which is a methodology that truly ensures your cloud boundary is secure, boundary protection, trusted networks, which is also similar. Actually, trusted networks is part of networking, but it's gaining more traction due to cloud computing, because as you begin to have cloud consumption, now you are having your own resources, data, and whatsoever being hosted by somebody, as well as that shared responsibility. So there's a need for you to have a trusted path, right? A trusted communication part. Just think of it as, what do you trust? Do you trust going by the road or flying? Those kind of things, right? Establishing a trusted path. identity and access management. Sometimes I think is the gatekeeper for security. So things like username, password, multi-factor authenticator. Now we have started going passwordless, right? I know Microsoft and Windows systems are pushing more towards hello login and things like that. So zero passwords. I promise I am not selling Microsoft, but yeah. This is another part like operations. People tend to ignore that part, especially back home. There is a need for continuous operations, right? So the need for operations center, security operations center, monitoring and incident response, right? In Nigeria, actually, under the within NSA, we have the CSERT, which is amazing. It's more of an incident response kind of team, but incident response is truly kind of a reactive, not proactive approach to security. So you basically are like the fire department, right? Something happens, you respond to it. You are not being on top of things, but it's also needed. Continuous testing. You don't test once, you do it continuously or periodically, from penetration testing and whatsoever. And for those of you who are interested in certifications for pen tests, that's why you start hearing certifications like ethical hacker and all of those kind of certifications, right? Or even going back to the networking, you start hearing things like the Cisco, CCNA, certifications, Palo Altos, and things like that. Then we have the cyber warfare side of things, which is really now becoming the thing because nation states no longer really go into war as like the traditional sense, right? Really, cyber warfare is taking over, and part of it, different methodologies from hackings, using malwares, ransomwares, DDoS, and things like that. Automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, these are all the advancements that are taking over from deepfakes whatsoever. So whichever aspect you feel you want to take. Cyber forensics. So I'm going to sit up a little bit for this. One thing that I want to add is there is this misconception that you have to be technical to actually do things in cybersecurity. I'm here to tell you it's a lie. I don't care whether if you know how to turn on a computer or not, you can be in cybersecurity. Everyone has something to contribute in the field. When you look at police officers, all right, they have been doing forensics for decades, be it Sherlock Holmes or even back home. A crime happened, you have to go and examine the place and whatsoever. The ability to do it in a digital fashion is now in the cyber forensics field. So much is going on from cybercrime, digital evidence collection, child pornography, a lot of crimes just are happening. And the ability for officers to be able to really gather evidence and things like that, it's the field, right? There's been so much advancement, but there's also so much legal issues around that. And it's really a huge gap. To my point on, you don't have to be technical to be in the cyber field. I do mean it. The field is continuously evolving. Technology is no longer a nerd kind of geek thing. Technology is now part of our lives. As such, it's really part of, I would say, the major sectors and the major industries. And be it you're a medical doctor or a lawyer, I assure you there are certain aspects that you have to play in terms of ensuring technology works for your sector. Those are the gaps that we are now facing a lot in terms of specialization and domain expertise related to certain fields and how technology is getting incorporated in those fields. So those are all the aspects. Then governance or laws. Technology is now, I would say, the number one tool we use day to day in terms of main things, like literally as we're talking right now, we are on Zoom. And because it has become a huge aspect of our life, there is a need for continuous governance in those sectors. That lack of governance is actually affecting us a lot, and we will discuss that in depth in a bit. but there is a need for having policies, compliance, regulatory bodies, and all of those in place. I believe, Dr. Musa, we can go to the next slide. So the most interesting part for most people, right, especially the students, is, well, some of you can see, Ibrahim, you've been talking for 20 minutes. All I want is, what should I do my research on? Well, I can tell you, I cannot tell you what to do your research on, but it is important to understand how to be able to narrow down your own topics based on your own personal interest and or even your own expertise. When you look at, actually, I will say Nigeria. When you look at a place like Nigeria today, some of the major gaps we currently have, to be honest, are not specific to cybersecurity or even security issues, things before security, or maybe things that should happen to enable security in itself, right? Keep in mind, security complements usage and business needs. Nobody will wake up and decide to just go and buy. Let's use a very conventional example. You wouldn't wake up and just decide, you know what, I'm going to build a house because I have bought this lock so I can install the lock. No, you buy the lock because you have a house so that you secure the house. You don't build a house because you have the lock. So at the end of the day, the most important thing is understanding that as I am building my house, I should be conscious that I need to secure it. So as you're installing a door frame, you should keep in mind that, well, probably the lock should go on this direction. You are not installing the lock yet, but you are keeping in mind that this is the direction it should go. That aspect is keeping security in mind, right? Like what we call baking in security. But again, it's very, very important to understand that the security is not what drives things. Also, you don't just build a house just like that. No, there has to be a reason. Maybe you need shelter or you're investing. But nobody just wakes up and do something like that. So at the end of the day, technology is not the main thing. Technology is meant to complement something, to satisfy a business need or whatever it is. When you look at the Nigerian landscape today, some of the challenges we are having are around governance, laws, or regulations, which are not necessarily technical issues, right? We need continuous evolution of those things. And then we need things around digital development. What do I mean by that? Which is, and our technology consumption, which is we need to align technology in itself, the different aspect of technology with our needs to understand how can technology be used to help us solve our problems, not just to deploy technology in itself. Nigeria, well, yeah, especially Nigeria specifically, is doing great in the financial sector, right? We have always been ahead of the curve, truly, truly. I tend to tell people, like, when you look at payment cards, we were even ahead. Like, Nigeria is actually doing better than the US in terms of those kind of sectors. And there's a reason for that. For as long as I can remember, as far back as I believe is it 2013 or 2014, we have been having continuous laws in place. CBN has been doing a great job in terms of regulating the financial sector and fitting it to the digital world. As things are moving on, I think as of 2018, we have things like payment services regulations that was pushed out by CBN. We 2019, NIDA released the data protection regulations and things like that. These allow industries to be able to consume technology in a regulated fashion. But there are other aspects that we are not doing great. When you look at how we are consuming technology, there is a huge misalignment with our needs. Let me give an example. When you look at the health sector, our educational sector, or even other aspects of our life, we are not incorporating technology as much to help us fill the gap. COVID happened. We need to have stable connections that allows remote learning. So then that technology consumption and digital development itself that often drives what needs to be secured needs to really be closed. That's when you start thinking of, well, the entire world is talking about 5G, 5G. We should do 5G, but should we? That's, as a researcher, these are questions that you need to start asking. Should we really deploy 5G technologies in places like Nigeria or not? I don't have the answer, but those are part of technology alignments. Or should we even prioritize really making internet in itself affordable and making internet consumption and access more affordable rather than deploying new technologies? All of these are type of questions that we need to close the gap. There are also sectors that have so much technology usage without existing regulations. So I believe all of us know about Twitter versus Nigeria, but when you look at the media space, today journalism in itself has become an online thing, but we do not have enough regulations in place that allows that to be what it should be in Nigeria. So, and that's not only Nigeria, we're having it all over. India is going through it. Canada just passed media related stuff, digital media kind of regulations. So we definitely need to close the gap in terms of our governance laws and existing regulations. There's so much to be done there. Digital development itself. Digital development, what should we develop? Meaning, what should we implement? As I mentioned earlier, when you look at the landscape, Dr. Musab can keep me honest here, but 5G technology, when you start looking at 5G in itself, what are the main advantages of having a 5G network? You can look at quality of service. It's mostly driven by Internet of Things. It's mostly driven by this interconnectivity. That's the gap is meant to close, right? This hyperconnectivity and quality of service, right? And continued connection. But when you look at the Nigerian landscape, do we really have, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we shouldn't deploy 5G. I'm saying as a researcher that you are doing a research specific to Nigeria, assuming your research is meant for Nigeria usage, these are kind of questions you should be asking. So should we really maximize our 4G usage, right? You look at 4Gs, it's meant to support connection up to gigabytes. Is Nigeria really able to, are you able to download at a gigabyte speed? Or are you downloading at like megabyte speed? So should we really exhaust those kind of things and ensure, deep connection? Places like Sokoto have connections. Now I'm taking a stab at Musab, right? Places like Sokoto have enough accessibility to networks that allow more user base, right? Or should we really prioritize things like 5G that are meant to optimize IoT devices which are not really in use? So all of those from a use case perspective are things we should be looking into. That's part of the digital development, as I was saying. Now, those parts, dependent on the country or the nation or your usage and the needs that technology is solving, you will find those are what drives what security deployments need to happen, right? So let's use this as an example. If we have this, as we are here, it's over Zoom, remote learning and whatsoever, how questions will start arising. If we are to see some random people begin to join this meeting, that's a security issue. That will drive the need to understand, well, how should we secure this Zoom session that we want to continue having? So as technology advances, you find that security is always trailing behind. So what I usually tell people is, it is very important, very, very important to understand the fundamentals of what exactly you are going to research from a technology perspective first. So don't say I'm going to get into network security research without understanding networking. There is value in prioritizing the technology in itself to understand the gaps that currently exist and then identify the security loopholes before you embark on the security research. Security is always trailing behind technology. And that's why we are constantly like you keep hearing this, oh, cybersecurity is the new thing, cybersecurity is the new thing. Well, truly, it's because the technology is moving at a faster rate than cybersecurity is. And cybersecurity needs are driven by technology consumption, right? As I mentioned earlier, we are in a Zoom session. If we start seeing people joining, we will begin to ask, how can we put controls in place, be it a username and a password, or what do we need to do to ensure those people are not joining? This is a classic example of security trying to close the gap that is in place due to technology advancement. So there are so many sectors that people can actually look at from different nations. I keep mentioning sectors because of two things. Technology, as I mentioned, is no longer a geek and a nerd kind of thing. So it's not a toy anymore, but rather a tool that is meant to facilitate our lives and help solve current problems. It is vital to start looking at what problems exist within the different sectors. So let's use the health sector as an example. I'm not a health specialist, but one can say, well, there is a huge misdiagnosis cases in Nigeria, blah, blah, blah. Maybe, if there's anyone from Sokoto, I'm not picking on you, I'm only picking on Musab. Maybe there's someone from Sokoto who doesn't have his medical records and he found himself in Kano, for example. How does he ensure that he's able to, maybe there's a language barrier or whatever. Now, the doctors in Kano probably do not know what the medical history of that person is. These are, and there is now a high chances of misdiagnosis and things like that. These are all type of probably issues that exist within the health sector. And then you begin to think of how can technology help solve that? Maybe having a centralized health record, or maybe having a centralized database. Okay, now maybe the Ministry of Health will start to think of, okay, let's stand up as some sort of a centralized health record where every single citizen will have his BVN associated to his health records. Okay, now you do that, but then you find that there is a security lapse. Well, that's a single point of failure. What happens if the data center catches on fire and everybody loses their record? Or what happens if someone is able to hack and steal it? And then you see now, after solving the health-related problem in the sector and where technology has done that, you are also identifying security lapses that happen by deploying that technology, because probably centralized data or whatever. And now you will start thinking of, well, if the concern is what happens if the data center catches on fire, then you start thinking of maybe data retention and then things like continuous backup in another location. That's part of cybersecurity. Or if you're thinking of, well, what happens if someone is able to hack into that single server and steal everybody's record? Now you start thinking of, maybe it's a good idea to put these type of security controls from IAM perspective, security, authentication whatsoever, all of these type of access, probably even whitelist or blacklist specific type of users, to say, okay, these are the only trusted entities that will access these type of data. Now you're talking about security, but it's not driven by the security in itself. Rather, it was driven by the type of technology you deployed, right? We deployed a centralized database or maybe some sort of centralized data center. But that technology deployment in itself wasn't just, we didn't just wake up and say, yeah, we just want to build a data center. No, it was driven because of a gap that exists within the health sector. So it's very important to align those kind of things from technology consumption. And that's that part of technology consumption strategies. If you ask me, well, how do I begin to narrow down? You can take it a top-down approach, a bottom-up approach. By top-down approach, you can look at the different sectors and say, what are the current challenges in Nigeria and how can technology help close those gaps? And if technology help close those gaps, then what security challenge present itself by using those technologies? And that's where you begin to see, okay, these are our cybersecurity needs. I'll give another example. Let's look at terrorism, for example, right? And this is more around those defense and intelligence kind of sector. We look at it, we look at terrorism activities and whatsoever, and then we begin to think of, well, maybe we need to monitor usage, right? I'm not trying to get political here, but we maybe begin to think of, maybe there is a need to monitor really cell phones if that's what is being used, right? At least a certain level, not to breach people's privacy, okay? But who's going to do that? Well, do we trust the government to do it? Maybe not. Do we trust the third party to do it? Well, what if the third party sells the data? So how do we solve it? Well, maybe we should take a different approach of having everybody register their kind of same and whatever, and if we're able to identify which number it is, it's tagged with your BVN, your bank records, and whatsoever. So now we have banks in the picture. We have government in the picture. You have all of these sectors. But then someone might say, why does a bank need my cell phone number? They don't need to have my phone number. Now that's also you trying to identify how to use securities, cybersecurity side of things to solve a gap that is presenting itself from technology. Let's use media, Twitter, for example, and what happened in Nigeria, right? That's more of a governance related stuff. You look at it, we live in this boundaryless kind of world where things are accessible to everybody. And then you look at it from what happened between Nigeria and Twitter, whichever side you want to take. Again, not picking a side, but then you begin to realize, so what just happened between Twitter and Nigeria? How can we ensure similar things do not happen again, right? Maybe we need to regulate media regulations. Journalism has always been regulated in these countries, so maybe we need to regulate it. But should we really regulate it because it affects people's freedom of speech? Or should we really leave it unregulated because it affects the other side of things, like, well, now Twitter is the government, right? So these are all kind of things. So I know we're up on time.
Yeah. Just
exactly.
Maybe I can give you about 5 minutes just to round up so that we can have some time for question and answers.
We're actually done. So yeah, thanks for calling my attention on that. So as you look at those things, there are three major aspects that I would say that are the topmost concerns for emerging nations: governance, laws, and regulations, understanding the technology that should be used to help our needs. So Nigeria, should, there are so many technologies. Should Nigeria start deploying them? Maybe, maybe not. And then based on that, you begin to realize, well, if we are deploying this technology, then we need to deploy it in a secure fashion and implement it in a secure fashion. And that's what tends to help frame your cybersecurity needs. Moving on to the next slide. So at a very high level, as I mentioned earlier, there are so many sectors. If anyone is doing their research, and these are the sectors that I play in, I am more conversant in. So cloud security is my bread and butter, virtualization, zero trust and things like that, a bit of networking and trusted path. My work is primarily on national security, so mostly that defense and intelligence operations. Digital development is something I teach, and digital governance, the policy side of things, has started becoming a hobby. So at any point, if anyone is doing research related to these areas and wanted to catch up, or you feel you want to, there's a place that we can collaborate or whatever it is, feel free to reach out to me on those topics. Simon Musab, I know he's deep networking SME. I'm not sure of Dr. Yusuf, I don't know much of that, but there are different as well folks. I know Dr. Bashir is like machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's his bread and butter. People like Professor Aisha Ali is in like malware analysis and whatsoever. So there are some of us that will definitely be able to get in, connect with you and work on those. If you want to get in touch, these are the ways to get in touch with me. I tend to put my learning on all of my resources, my research and everything on GitHub. Most times I open source them, so that's my GitHub handle. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and if people have questions, please go for it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim Waziri, for this wonderful presentation. We really appreciate you taking time to go through all these explanations and introducing several aspects of cybersecurity to us and to the rest of the audience. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Habib Akudi for gracing this event. Thank you very much for coming, Doctor. Now it's time for question and answers. As I have said earlier, because we are organizing this event specifically for BUK, we will give priority to students from BUK to ask questions. So if you have a question to the presenter, kindly raise up your hand and ask them. I will enable you to unmute yourself, and then you could ask a question. And you can also send your question towards the chat. And I think we have one here. So Mr. Lukman is saying, sir, I learned that in this field of cybersecurity, what is really important is your skills and experience. What you can do will make you so much successful than what you know. I hope you had his question, Ibrahim. What can you say about that?
I think this is not a question of cybersecurity. It's more of a question on the soft skill, right? I would say, I would tailor this to me. Passion, honestly. I tend to say that even if I don't have to work for money, I think I'll still do cybersecurity. I love to break things. I love computers. So there's this deep passion. And when you have the passion, you find that you are continuously learning, right? But I also don't want you to really, skill is subjective, basically, right? So when you say in this cybersecurity field, you need deep skills, that's true. You need a certain competence to be able to navigate things, but it doesn't translate to skill set, especially from technology perspective, because it's continuously evolving. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's not really a question of domain, it's more of a question of soft skills, right? That deep passion, go for what you're passionate about, honestly. Don't go for the hype. Don't go for the, whoa, this is what's making the news. Go for what exactly you are passionate about. Back in the early 2000s, networking was everything that everybody is talking about, CCNA certification and all of that. Hardly do you hear it today, but guess what? There is still opportunities in that field. It's still a field that is driving a lot of things. So stay focused on your own passion. That will be honestly my point.
So he has a follow-up comment here saying he means solving technical problems is the way to running the trust and confidence from people you work with.
Okay. Solving technical problems.
I think the if I understand him correctly, what he's trying to say is, if you have the skills, the necessary skills to solve problem is more important, I guess, than having the certifications and all.
That's fair at a certain point, absolutely. And it also depends on the country and things like that. Nigeria, we still value a lot of certificates. I mean, I'm a classic example. I have a HND and everybody knows that. But it depends. I would still say in a place like Nigeria, you need to validate your expertise with certifications. In the US, it's not really a thing. Nobody cares. But at the same time, if you are looking for opportunities to harness your skill, education, as always, has always been the best way to harness your skill. If you're able to secure a job, that will allow you to now show your competence and harness your capabilities. So I think it's more of a natural evolution based on what you're able to deliver.
Okay, thank you. I have unmuted Abdullahi Ahmed. I asked you to unmute. You can go ahead and ask a question. I guess you are from BUK because I think Malam Bello mentioned your name.
My name is Abdullah Ahmad Shehu from BUK. So I think I had the presenter, especially the one that present in terms of cybersecurity. I think the way forward now for us in Nigeria is to at least try to go with the trend of the current technology, because most of the technology now are data-driven. So we should focus on data-driven application before thinking of how to secure them in the cloud. So I think it is right time for us to start automating our system in such a way that we can value the current trends going in the world now.
Thank you. Thank you, Malabla. I think it's a comment that he presented. I don't know if Ibrahim has anything to add, or we should go to the next
I don't think there's a question there. I think it's just a validation of a comment. I agree with to a certain extent. And I think whatever it is we need to do, be it automation, data-driven approach whatsoever, it's just important that we are able to understand how it solves our problems.
Thank you very much. So I will go to the comment section. There are a number of questions that have been sent. So the first one is how privacy preserving collaborated filtering is related to cybersecurity. So privacy preserving collaborative filtering, how is it related to cybersecurity?
That's actually a new thing for me. Privacy preserving collaborative filtering. Now I can say that privacy is a subset of cybersecurity, right? As you narrow down, just like you have cloud security, network security, and whatsoever, privacy is now looking at making sure your data is private, not secure. There is a clear difference between privacy and security. Security is around access, and privacy is making sure that it's only available to those that are trusted. And again, sometimes privacy from a nation perspective tends to be driven by laws and regulations as well, but there's also the technology side of things. There are existing tools and approach to ensuring privacy, but privacy is part of cybersecurity.
Thank you. And there is a question here which I also want to ask. So what are the books and journals you suggest for national cybersecurity strategies or policy? The question actually that I wanted to ask at the end of your presentation, if I have the chance, is do you have any pointer to some resources that students can go for? So maybe a website, apart from, I know you've shared your website where you share your works, but maybe there's a particular website where people can get a kind of collection of everything cybersecurity kind of.
You know what? That is absolutely true. There are a lot of them, from a governance, technical, and all of those, including free places you can go and learn. I think what I would do is put them together. I don't know who I should email it to that will be able to disperse it to everybody. Or if there is a centralized place, like especially for the students, I don't know, Dr. Musab, Yusuf, or is it Dr. Bello? Happy to definitely put those together. There are a lot of them, right? Including the list of books. I have a lot also here, so I'll be happy to share. Yeah.
Sure. When we make this, so I shared the link of our YouTube page where we will post the video of this presentation, of this session, and we will put in the description of the video, we'll put in links to all the necessary resources and contacts that people could actually use to get to us and to access the different resources. And I think there's someone, Alex Aaron, raising his hand. I have asked you to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question, Alex.
Okay. So the question I want to ask is this. Item number 7, automation, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Could you please explain a little on automation and tell us how it is related to machine learning and artificial intelligence?
Sure, absolutely. Before I do that, keep in mind that is not one of my domains and specialties. So at a very high level, surface area.
Maybe I take over.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mali. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, automation is just simple. It has been going on since the beginning of humanity. The process of taking a manual task and just trying to get machine to do the same task. We have drawn water from the well, and somebody somehow invented a wheel to help us do that. So that is not something new. We have been doing it for a long time. You use your watch. It's nothing but just automation process that use mechanical components to give you the timing of the day. That's what it is. So what we currently have is the process where we try, let's say you want to take a particular task, say driving. This is a manual task that we know that humans are good at. We take a car, we learn how to drive, we get the driver's license, then we drive. That's all. But then when, let's say you want to automate this task, how do you do that? How do you take it away from human and just surrender it to machine? I'm not talking about the ethical issues of it. You can argue whether it's good or bad, but the reality is that we always do that. So the process is that in the modern day, what we normally do is that, because if you were to teach a car to drive, it's near impossible to do that because nobody knows how to drive. Even if we do, it involves huge number of variables. Nobody can tell you that. So the easiest thing that some brilliant people have found out is that, okay, instead of going to tell the car, this is how to drive, why don't we see how drivers drive, collect the data set and just train the model, the system. Okay, here is the way people drive. Machine, can you learn something from this? And there are a huge number array of techniques that you do, that you can teach the system to take a given data set, dig into it, get the salient features out of the data set, and in the process, then it's do what you want. So the data, usually the data and the automation are entirely, they are two different set of things, but these days they are converging into one plus. So there is not like automation, it's one thing, data is another thing. No. You just use the data to help you do the automation. That's the process, nothing more than that. Well, but this is security kind of a session. I think we should concentrate more on the security aspect of it to give the presenter a fair chance to make a better presentation. And for those who wants to talk about machine learning, please reach out to Dr. Bello. We can organize a new session for you. It's fine. Always there are people who are better than either of us on this field that we can bring in to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Marlon. So we have a lot of questions in the chat. We'll try to take as much as possible, keeping in mind that we wanted this session to be 1 hour, not more, but I think there are interesting questions. So we'll maybe take it to 1 hour, 15 minutes to be able to answer as many questions as possible. We started 1:15. Oh, sorry, I'm in Saudi Arabia. We started 11:15 and we'll try and finish by, inshallah, 12:30. So another question here says, so what are the skills needed to learn cybersecurity? Please.
I think we mentioned this earlier. Yeah. When cybersecurity is quite too general and broad, so there is a need to narrow it down. Are you talking about cloud security, network security, application security? So many aspects of those. And whatever it is that you eventually narrow down, it's like when you say cybersecurity, you're just saying like, what are the skills needed to learn technology? But what technology are you talking about? Are you talking about machine learning? Are you talking about artificial intelligence, networking, whatsoever? So whatever it is that you eventually narrow down, let the technology drive it. What do I mean by that? It's if you want to participate in network security, then you need to have skill sets in networking. If you want to be in cybersecurity governance, laws and regulations, that it's important. I'm not saying to be a lawyer, but to familiarize yourself with the existing laws around technology that exist, right? So if you want to go into privacy laws and things like that within cybersecurity, say GDPR, then you should be familiar with what NIDA released in 2019 around the Nigerian data regulation, which is also part of regulation policies law. If you want to get into cloud security, familiarize yourself with what is cloud computing. Again, the technology always drives the security. Keep in mind.
Thank you. So there's a question here about cybersecurity on privacy, which I believe you have just attended to a few minutes ago. So a question here also asking, what will you be taking if you study MS Cybersecurity in National Open University in Nigeria? But I think this is not only Nigeria. Maybe the general question will be, what are the courses that someone takes if they are to study MSc in cybersecurity?
That's a tough question for me, and I do mean it very honest, because I didn't do my master's in Nigeria. I honestly don't have much understanding of Nigerian curriculums. However, the courses right? Undergrad, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I know undergrad, you take a lot of courses, right? As you go into masters, you begin to specialize, right? So you begin to narrow it down. So if you are in, say, computer science, undergrad, you take a bit of programming, a bit of networking, a bit of all of these different courses. As you start going into your masters, depending on the school, in the US, you have what we call electives. You select your courses yourself, but the core courses will be based on your concentration. So you might end up having Masters in Cybersecurity with a focus in machine learning. And as such, you find like you're taking more machine learning related courses. Or you have Masters in Cybersecurity with a focus in cloud security. Now you're taking more courses in cloud security and cloud research. As you go into your PhD, it completely puts your focus on that specialization. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's good enough. So generally what you should know is when you go into cybersecurity or any other field of specialization, you at master's level, the curriculum will usually allow you to study courses that gives you foundation into that field of study. So if it is cybersecurity, you may do courses in networks, in cloud, in whatever, as Ibrahim said, and then the focus will be on the security of those particular subject areas.
I want to quickly add something, Dr. Musab, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
I just saw one comment around, someone said, I would like to briefly, they will want me to briefly discuss where we got it wrong in Nigeria. I think that's wrong for us to think that we got things wrong. We didn't get anything wrong. We did not get anything wrong. Our technology space and cybersecurity and whatever it is, we did not get anything wrong. We are evolving. We tend to, one big mistake in terms of technology that we tend to do is compare ourselves with nations that are way ahead of us. You can compare Nigeria's technological advancements with China or the US or some other places where like China's GDP or even Nigeria's GDP is like, US GDP is like 10 times that of entire Africa. You can compare that, right? But at the same time, if you look at other places, or even Russia, you can compare that. If you look at other places like Malaysia, you look at other places that are also evolving, which you can compare them to Nigeria, you find that we are not really far off behind. So it's a misconception to keep thinking that we are wrong. We're not getting things wrong. Can we go faster? Yes, probably. But it's important for us to acknowledge that we also have challenges beyond technology currently. So while we are talking about technology, it's very vital for us to understand and have an optimistic mindset, not the pessimistic one of thinking we are getting things wrong. We are not.
Yeah, can I add something?
Yes.
Sure, Mali.
Yeah, the reality is that our academics in Nigeria are doing a fabulous job. We, first of all, should appreciate them. They work under a constraint that we that are living in this luxury outside home might not be able to cope. Many of us ran away because we couldn't cope. So please, first of all, let's acknowledge their effort. Let's thank them for what they do. Let's see the constraint they do. Then we can start thinking about how do we improve it. This initiative is one approach towards that. How do we complement them? How do we provide the resources that otherwise they could not? So if we look negatively, there is no way we can move forward. The people that we see advanced, they had a particular mindset, which is appreciate what you have, work for what you want.
All right.
Thank you, Mali. So I think I just asked the question. There's a question here. We still have, so this is 12:20. We have 10 minutes to go. I have asked Mala and Dr. Bello to unmute because there's a question here from a student which says, one problem is getting the research area. Another problem is finding a supervisor that has in-depth knowledge on that area. So maybe as a university lecturer in Nigeria, I will want you to advise the student what should they do if they find themselves in this kind of situation. We, as one of the reasons for organizing this before you respond, Malam Bello, is we want to give you an opportunity to get access to some resource persons that could help you in your research. So even if you don't have someone who is qualified in your department, we are happy to help or find someone who can help. But yeah, I want someone who is a lecturer in Nigeria to respond to you. How could they, if Malam Bello is available? Malam Bello, Dr. Bello, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so as part of the question mentioned by the student, so literally each department have areas in which they have expertise in. So sometimes, for example, here in the BUK, we try to advertise the areas or the skills, the fields where we have expert on, and the student could work on that expertise. So I think this is like a general issue, like if you, for example, somewhere in the universities, like in UK, so when you intend to do in a research in an area where they don't have expertise, they can obviously tell you, okay, we don't have expertise working in that, but you can go this place where they have such kind of expertise. And in terms of identifying a research gap and then of course, even the research topic. So what we do recommend is you try to engage with someone who is expert in that. For our MSc student now, we try to even get the topics ready for them before they even requested, in such ways that we ask such expert that, okay, can you bring us 3 areas where you feel you want student to work on or to research on, so that we can advertise to the student, and then if anyone is interested, then we can link the student to that person so that they discuss further. So that is the steps we have here in terms of finding a research questions, research problems. Because some MSc students, of course, they are not quite strong enough to propose a research which is at an MSc level. So in that, they need a little hands-on on how to put or to frame their own research problem.
Thank you very much,
yeah.
Dr. Bello. Thank you very much. I think there's another question here that I think is quite relevant. So Mala Ibrahim, we really appreciate you for the wonderful presentation. You made mention of closing gaps on regulations in Nigeria. Are there possible research gaps for upcoming researchers to fill in this regard? So basically, someone is asking you if there's a research topic that you can give them in this area to follow.
I will not give a research topic in that area, but there are so many gaps. But I also see it more as there is so much to do, not necessarily gaps, right? Currently, we have Nigerian data regulation, protection regulation, right? It's amazing. Honestly, I like it. I read it completely. It doesn't provide implementation process as nope. Another thing is we do not have much standards. Nigeria, like when you look at the Standard Organization of Nigeria, SON, Standard Organization of Nigeria needs to start creating standards that are tailored specific to Nigeria, not continuously consuming the international standards like ISO 27001 or 27002 that are meant to be a boilerplate for cybersecurity, not necessarily tailored to the nation, right? Each single country have a different approach to how it does its things. You cannot take a standard and regulation that is US driven and apply it in a place like Nigeria. Let me actually give you a very simple example. In the US, we still do not have a federal level data regulation policy. Why is that? Because the ad market in itself is the big market, and having one will hinder that market. The UK, not just UK actually, the entire EU has GDPR. Nigeria has data protection regulation. Why am I mentioning this? It is important to know that it is not a gap. It is about looking at laws that applies to Nigeria from a technology standpoint. US doesn't have it, Nigeria has it. Does that mean that it's a gap or Nigeria is left behind? No, it's not. So Twitter and Nigeria, for example, that's like someone who said they want a topic. Go look on that. Go look on what are the regulatory issues that resulted into social media is unregulated or whatsoever. What should be done? Should it be regulated? Should it not be regulated? Those are all cybersecurity from an ethical and law perspective.
Thank you, Mala Ibrahim. I think that I will take the last question and then I will ask Dr. Habiba to give us some closing remarks afterwards. There's someone is asking, you talk about 5G, its applicability to Nigeria. I would like to have an example application of it in any country.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when you look at, not necessarily African nations, but most of these nations, advanced nations, there is a proliferation of Internet of Things, a lot of IoT and connectivities. That's where 5G is used a lot. So a classic example is, look at Tesla. There are capabilities like self-driving in Tesla. The ability for Tesla to communicate with traffic lights when it's red for it to know to stop in itself requires a quality of service and a continuous connection. What do I mean by continuous connection? When you look at 4G, and Dr. Musab, you know more of this than I do, the nature of downstream and upstream in network, it's beyond the availability of bandwidth and the scope of bandwidth, but it's also that QoS, right? The quality of service. It's something that 4G might not be as reliable as 5G when it comes to the ability in milliseconds for your car that is driving itself to literally know that the light is red for it to stop automatically. So those kind of things are the applications of 5G. When you look at Nigeria, it's possible for us that probably, maybe not in the public domain. I don't know of the national security. Maybe there are use cases, but on the public domain, we are still at the process, at that consumption phase where we need increased bandwidth, affordability, and scope for people to have general access. So that's where we are, not necessarily in those interconnectivity of Internet of Things and automations, as Dr. Yusuf is talking about, such that when you are literally 5 minutes away from your home, let your AC turn on itself automatically because your phone is able to talk to your air conditioner. We don't have those things yet, but we will get there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim, for your presentation. I think I'll draw the curtain on the questions here, and I will ask the head of department, who was part and parcel of the organization of this session, to say a word or two before we close this session. Dr. Habiba, you can unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Waziri, Dr. Musab Isa, Dr. Yusuf, and all others. Thank you very much for actually reaching out to us through Dr. Bello to give us this very fruitful, productive, and comprehensive seminar. It is our hope that these kind of seminars will continue in time. My students and I have so many questions, and I think those questions can only be answered through seminars like this. And we hope that when we come calling, because we're going to be knocking at your doors multiples of times with collaborative requests and assistance in our researches, and especially those that will give us practical applications like Dr. Waziri has been drumming into us. We should try to do researches that are useful to our society. So in stuff like that, we'll come calling all the time, and I hope that all assistance will be rendered to us either through us, the lecturers, or even when the students reach out on their own. So finally, we would like to thank you very much for this, as I said, fruitful seminar, and we hope that we continue to work with you and your colleagues in the future, very near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity as well. And this has been an amazing thing, truly. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Bello, thank you very much for helping organize this session.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone for attending. As I have mentioned at the beginning of the session, we are happy to, if perhaps you're joining us from a different university in Nigeria, and if you want to have a session like this, do reach out to us and tell us what your area of interest is, and we'll find a resource person or persons either in Nigeria or from abroad that can come and talk to you about the topics and the areas that you can dig into as far as research is concerned. I will like to thank my co-organizer here, Dr. Yusuf Sani. He is actually the one who is up and doing in making sure that these events are happening. Thank you, Ibrahim Waziri. We woke you so early in the morning in the US to do the presentation for us. And thanks to everyone for attending. I would like to acknowledge my brother here, Engineer Ashraf Muhammad, for joining us, and the rest of the people from different parts of the country. We will make this session available via YouTube, and I'll put it on my Facebook page for those of us who are connected to me on Facebook. Yusuf too will put it, and also we'll try to put it on LinkedIn as well, so that you can revisit and listen to the presentation again. Thank you very much for attending, and see you in our next seminar, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.